So for me it's a 2 hour trip, and in this video I'll share a little bit of channeling information about the Russian and Ukraine war. Well, basically the Russian war against Ukraine, but anyway. I did this video in Latvian, but some of you asked for English version, so here's the English version. And this wasn't done in a complete switched channeling state. This information was gathered like in a conscious, like there was a stream of information that was coming through, and consciously just shared the information. So before I start sharing this information, there's a couple other things I want to share. The first thing is there's a car driving opposite. The first thing is that let's stop just here. The first thing is that some of this information I already knew. Like you know, everybody knows that there's a war, and some of this information I didn't know. So it puts me in a state where I got confused a little bit. Not like confused, but like I get confused. Like, hey, yeah, why I speak about war? I will share this a little bit later. And I was like confused in a way that I'm listening to this information. I'm like, I want something new. I want something new, and the information keeps on going, and I'm just observing. Yeah, all right. This is something I knew already. And then there's points where, okay, this I didn't know. This was really interesting for me. So this information will be, which I will share, it will be mixed together for something that I knew and something I didn't know. So it's a mixture together. And why I'm sharing or channeling information about war is because you know, for the last maybe 5 years I'm quite off of the channeling information. War is not a negative energy. War is like I will talk about this a little bit at the end of the video about this. War is like to some, war is the only possible experience. For some souls and some beings, it's the only possible experience. So in a way, if from a higher realm beings want to experience war, it's a overall a must-have experience. Whether it's good or negative, it's not classified by any means, by any higher beings. It's just like an experience. Because you know, we would say that war is bad because it's very destructive, and people are being killed. But you look at it from variety of perspectives. You know, people anyway kill animals. Animals kill each other, like nature itself, in a way of balance. Everything has a beginning, has an end. So I would say, from my experience, from my perspective, everything is a neutral experience. It's just the way we perceive it and the way we accept it. Because you may say it's a negative experience, but maybe somebody else is really enjoying it. So to him, maybe it's a positive experience. Who knows? And maybe others, like we channeled one soldier, like maybe 3 years ago. Well, he died somewhere also in the battlefield, but he saw after his life this as a really brotherhood, a really tight and a really strong, like, you know, you're with your buddies, they help you, you help them in a very, very difficult situation. You're like brothers, really, really close brothers. And then when I felt that energy, I felt that's highly blissful energy that cannot be, it's like brotherhood. It cannot be experienced in a different way other than that. Maybe somebody experienced those in different ways, but who knows? Anyway, it's not about whether it's good or bad. It's just how do you experience it. But in any way, of course, it's bad. From my personal experience, from my personal perspective. So anyway, about the war. So we sat down and it was a single person channel. Like me and my father, we were there, and we just said that let's warm up the channel. It's like, it wasn't been a long since we channeled, so let's try something. And the question was about war. Like nothing else in our. Wait, there's a red light. So I've passed the red light. Sorry, guys. And yeah. So anyway, so about the question. So we sit down, and they ask something about. The father asked something about the questioner asked something about war, and the information started like a little bit putting him on pause, like Ukrainian war, putting them on pause and telling that well, let's look a little bit into the history, and it was a little bit. The information was jumping between timelines, but I will keep in a single timeline. They started talk about the Chernobyl power plant which exploded, and they said that there's 3 or 4 these reactors, and the last one exploded because they said, well, you know how these things go. For the last one, the budget was a little bit already overspent. And things were built there with little less. You know, when you build blocks by block, there is some kind of concrete glue between them, connecting those blocks together. And so that even that glue was saved too much. And personally, the whole building it could have been holding together much better, because you know, like in Russia, the Chernobyl is in Ukraine, but as from the channeling information I understood, Russians helped to build it. So at that time, Ukraine and Russia was basically working together on many fields. They were like brothers, I understood. So the 4th reactor was, well, the 3rd one, who knows, the last one, if you look from one side. It was well, the money wasn't enough to finish it in a complete quality as it was meant to. But nobody talked about that, and nobody actually talked about that. Because of that, also, what understood there is a liquid. It's water cooled. These reactors are water cooled, and the water itself is highly radioactive, full with these radioactive materials, and turning off and on the reactor is a little bit a challenge. It's a dense procedures because of the cooling, because of the coolant. And what I understood, there is a way that if you turn on the reactor, there are some kind of rods there, and one part of the rod goes up, and when you turn off, another part of the rod goes down. So basically, that's a way how you turn off those reactors. So because it was already on a routine schedule that again we need to turn off the reactors, or again we need to do this off, and we need to then do this and that. The people they're working, because it happened on a regular basis that you need to switch it on, off, on, off, on, off. They were already in a routine. Okay, I'll go and turn it off. And somehow the personnel managed to turn it off and on at the same time. So basically a rod was going upwards and the rod was going downwards, upwards and downwards, and it caused a high reaction in which the rods, I understood, melted or bent a little bit, and then you couldn't even start to turn it off or start to turn it on. It was jammed. And it was jammed in the position that it starts accelerating, and what I saw there was a huge light between the rods, and from my understanding it was like near the explosion there, and it caused a highly huge temperature, which then caused the water in the reactors to boil up and explode. And it wasn't like an explosion of full with fire and flames like after some kind of a nuclear explosion. It was just a huge steam ball that smashed out to the nearly finished or budget saved walls of the building. And the most dangerous thing, what I understood there, was that the steam, the radioactive steam, went up because it's hot water. It went up in the clouds, and then clouds got it throughout the atmosphere to a really large area, like the poisoned area was really large. It was really large and really big. So that was the most dangerous part. When something like that happens, the steam goes really, really high and contains a lot of things. It turns into a cloud. So I think that from afterwards, I thought, if I were need to build a nuclear reactor, I really think it all over how to make it so if something explodes there, like this water coolant boils up quickly, that it's somehow, in a way, the steam is collected and thrown into another place, so it doesn't create the massive toxic cloud. But anyway, let's skip this part. Let's focus on the next things that happened. So it happened like it's like that near the 1990s. So, but the next thing that happened was the beginning of the war. It's all started with unclassified channeling information in 1991. There was a change in Russian parliament or government. I didn't quite understood whether it's a parliament or government or whatever is established there. But before the 1991, the Russian society and the government was more co-working together with other places. It was more open to opportunities. It was more open to science. It was more open to many things. It was really the Russia itself. There were some things even being discovered or developed in Russia at that time. It was like more open than it was after the 1991. So, and after 1991, the information was like that in Russian power came the governmental power came something like a mafia, but they didn't use the word mafia. They used a government which was, let's say, organized by a shorter society or a narrow society whose main interest was to get all by themselves. So basically what I understood is that the new mafia type of government wanted to get all infrastructures to their personal belongings. Like before that, maybe it was more, what I saw really positive, it was more for the society. Yeah, so basically all people in a way in several regions work together in a way. Afterwards it was like the mafia type of government wanted to get things in Ukraine till the 1998. Things started to happen a little bit. The Ukrainians as a society, as a community, as I don't know, citizens maybe, started to wake up to something that is not right. Something is not right. So they started to notice more and more and more that Russia is starting to take things under their own hands, meaning like they're starting getting on their own hands some infrastructures also in Ukraine. And the thing is that what I saw in the information is that somewhere at that time Ukraine was open borders with Russia, and they were they were working together in the bottom regions of the Ukrainian map, like the Crimea and the Donbass region, somewhere there. And at that point, after the 1991, the Russian mafia, they started to infiltrating there as well, because understood Ukraine has many resources, many different types of resources. So what was going on there is that these Russians started to infiltrate these cities with resources, the bottom of Ukraine, and they started basically bribing, and they started basically infiltrating government structures and silently maybe stealing, getting across the border many things and resources. And upon 1998, which is the close to 2000 year, the Ukraine started to notice this more and more and more, and then they started to start to argue with the Russians up until 2008, when the Ukraine society was coming aware that the Russians are basically stealing out the Ukraine country as such. So basically what I understood is they were silently taking away their resources, their land, they were infiltrating their governments. They were like, hey, we are brothers, we are friends, so let's work together. But at the backside, they're like, okay, let's work together, but we'll take many things from you away. So in 2008, when I understood, the Ukraine society has started to wake up in a way that she's like, the Ukraine is like, hey, we as a society start to wake up, the power of the people are starting to wake up, because, and even really individually they start to wake up, because as a whole, as the Ukrainian people, because they realize that they are being robbed and stealed all in many unpolite ways, and they are starting to get really angry. And what I understood in 2008, the Ukraine developed their own governmental power, like the governmental of society. I don't know how it's in history written, but to me it was like the Ukrainians developed their own some kind of a social based government. Prior to that, I understood that it's more likely that they were like, I don't know how to call it, that all regions are by themselves. That all regions are by themselves. Like, if the region, let's say Donbass region, says, yeah, we don't need help from, let's say, the main capital region, then the capital region says, okay, you're good to go then. It's all good. But imagine, as from the Russian infiltration in the government, they were, yeah, it's all good, we don't need any help. And then these Ukrainians, after 2008, when they established some kind of a pro-Ukrainian government, or a part of it, it maybe would be called, also it could be called Ukrainian Guard or something like this, or Ukrainian police. They started to talking with these governments and say, yeah, can you please give us reports of, let's say, the resources that you dig, or the capital you have in your region. And that region started to not work together with the Ukrainian police, or Ukrainian, let's call it Ukrainian People Guard, the I don't know, the Ukrainian Guard, whatever, some kind of specific name. So it's like maybe Ukraine at the 1991 was a communism-based country where everything is by themselves, and then they created some kind of a collecting data about what things are going on, like a small structure of government that collects data about what's going on in each region of Ukraine, and then all of a sudden some parts of Ukraine are telling like, yeah, don't mind your own business, don't put your nose here. And then the Ukraine as people, they started to really wake up. They started to really wake up and said something is really wrong here, like something is very wrong here. And they started to notice that these regions below, the Crimea region, the Donbass region, the regions which are near the coast, that these are Russian regions. These are completely governed by Russian authorities. It's completely Russian. It's like they don't want to. Yeah, it's Ukraine territory. It's by the country of Ukraine, but they are completely not, in a way, working together with the Ukrainian government's officials or whatever there is. But they realized that something is very wrong here. And after the 2008, they started this Ukrainian guard, this Ukrainian police, started to arrest or touch those bribed Russian governmental puppets. And what happened then was that the Russian government in Russia told that Ukrainians are going out of control. What are you doing? But so the Ukrainians are, what are you doing here? It's Ukraine. Why are you stealing things from us, taking them abroad? And then the political scandal started to rise from 2008, which was basically caused by this Russian mafia, which wanted to put their palms on resources what the Ukraine has. So, and things there got more and more challenging, because the Russians, in a way, I don't know what resources are in Ukraine, but when I understood, there are really expensive and useful resources there. And by resources, from the information, it could be anything. It could be gas, it could be oil, it could be some kind of maybe coal, maybe gold, maybe diamonds. Who knows? By resources, it's everything of that nature. So, and then the Russian politics, let's call it now, the Putin, maybe, who was there, I don't know who was there in control, the Russian mafia, they were, hey, Ukrainians, what are you doing? You are anti-Russian, you're like racists. You are like racists. You are humiliating and arresting innocent Russian people. And they're like, oh, what are you talking about? These are bribe puppets. They are stealing money from Ukraine, stealing resources, money, and taking away governmental power from Ukraine. And these things started to happen more louder and more louder until Ukraine took full control and established their own government throughout all Ukraine. And maybe some other parts. And that was the moment when 2014, when Russia understood that they have lost control of these regions in Ukraine, and then they invaded Ukraine. And it was actually really, really easy for Russians to invade Ukraine, because all those governments are bribed there. It's basically, yeah, we will protect our land and everything, but as soon as Russian tanks entered Crimea, the Ukraine government told just lay down your guns, leave your guns, and everybody who is Ukrainians, go away from here. So a little bit prior from the 2014, what I saw the images of Ukraine government, and they're like, it's crazy. It's Ukraine by the flag of Ukraine. But it's completely Russia there. It's completely bribed. It's completely out of control. It's completely Russia under the Ukraine flag. And there were the Ukrainians were, as a society, they got really, really, in a polite way, pissed off, like really. And the thing is, they become more united by that way as well, because they all understood that we are being robbed. The whole Ukrainian people are being robbed and tricked and told fairy tales and everything, like propaganda. and they started to awake really, really strongly against the ruling governments, and they throwed off all the Russian officials there, and they established their own pure government. And when they established their own pure government, they wanted to take back full control of their regions, but it didn't happen because Russia invaded Crimea, and it's an ongoing conflict. So these Ukrainian police, they wanted to infiltrate those governments and take control back from those puppet governments in the bottom regions of the map. But it was again backed by the Russian army and Russian propaganda that Ukrainians are destroying their own people. Ukrainians are racist against Russians. They're doing bad people. But what they are doing, what the Ukrainians are doing, they were trying to take back their land and their control of their cities, of course, control of their resources, what basically was stolen from them. So yeah, that's what I'm super channeling. So this was a little bit interesting for me to hear something like this. And then the story continued. So in 2014 they invaded, and there were still fights going on in those bottom regions because Ukraine didn't want to give up. Neither the Russians wanted to give up. They wanted to have those resources, have their land back, which were pretty good at before. And I don't know what resources are there, but at that point, when we got to our time right now, Father asked about what's the outcome, like what will happen next, and maybe he asked about the Nord Stream, and the information was that Nord Stream was destroyed by Americans, and they were like, what? People think it was destroyed by Russians, but no, it was destroyed by Americans. And they're like, what? And the information was that we didn't talk about much how the war started. Only escalated from the year 2008, and so they tell that in a way the Americans find it beneficial to actually, and all Europe, to actually start fight against Russian resources. And the first thing is the Nord Stream pipeline. The second is Crimea. And they told the information told that in Crimea, somewhere, if you look at Crimea on the side closer to Georgia, again, no, Georgia is like, yeah, anyway, it's closer to Georgia. I didn't know that there are some kind of a resource pipe, and maybe those are gas pipelines, maybe those are oil pipelines. So the thing is, the information told that it's because those pipelines go through bottom of the Black Sea and then somewhere in the Romania up and somewhere left to Europe, the pipelines cause huge resistance and not much gas or oil can go through there. So it's really beneficial to shorten those pipelines through Crimea and connect them in the part of Ukraine and then to the Europe. So it's a really beneficial to create a detour through Crimea and to the Ukraine there. So it's a strategical point for more resource handling, let's say like this. The next thing is, of course, I knew that it could be also, in interest that in Crimea there are some kind of oil pumps there, maybe to connect them as well. The next thing they tell that the Americans, they understand that it will be really difficult for Ukraine's to get back the Kherson region and the Kherson city, which is on the very edge of the entry to Crimea. It'll be very difficult. They consider it not to be possible, or not so possible. So the Americans are considering to invade Crimea themselves through the coastlines, when understood by boats and by air, or maybe by air, maybe by boats. But the information was like, it's maybe this or maybe that, depending whether Ukrainians can go through the Kherson region, because it's a difficult situation in the Kherson, because understood there is many rivers there, like crossings. If the, let's say, bridges are destroyed, there are swamps as well, also somewhere a little bit lower. It's a city itself, it can be bombed, full with booby traps, and it also can be flooded. So it's a really, really difficult situation. That region is a really difficult situation. However, they thought that the Americans would want to and could, understood that there's a high chance that the Americans will just go by air into Crimea. And the funniest thing is that maybe after 3 days of the channeling, I saw that some kind of a Russian battleships are being attacked in the same place where I saw in the channeling that the Americans will want to invade the Crimea, in the bottom left flank of the Crimea. I was like, okay, interesting. So the next thing, they told a little bit of maybe it's a 50-50 chance. They told that there is a part of Belarusia, a border that comes into Poland's border, and there is a chance that small gap, border gap, is a high tunnel of resources, and I didn't know what's there. It's like that's a high tunnel of resources there, and I didn't understand. I didn't know what's going on there until after the channeling, I checked the maps, and there's some also fuel and natural gas pipelines going through there, and they thought that it's a 50-50 chance that we need to attack that part of Belarus to destroy those pipelines. So, in overall, they said it's a really aggressive war against Russian resourcing links, resource connections to Europe. They told that, the information told that the Ukraine and the Black Sea, and a little on the right, is the central Europe of the huge continent. And therefore, it's the central gateway for resources there and back. So it's a really complex and a really big deal there is actually. And there was another funny, interesting thing. They'll tell that basically military is like, they change plans really often. They change plans. They change plans from this to that to this to that. And whatever they decide, let's say Americans would want to invade Crimea, the attack Russians, let's say, whenever the military decides that, okay, we need to do it now, the information is given to politicians. Okay, try to tell why do we need it to do this, like figure out the way we need to do this, and they attack this. And they do this, and politicians figure out a way, there's some kind of news events and stories, why we needed to do this, right? So, but like, let's say months later, the politicians say, yeah, we need to do this for the sake of our community, for the sake of the growth, or blah, 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 blah. And then maybe after a month, the military decides a completely different strategy, and they, for example, attack Belarus and leave the Crimea alone. It's like an example. It's not that they will do it, but it's an example. And they give the news again to politicians, like figure out the story, why we needed to do this, right? And the politicians are always in a full position. like they're constantly being fooled, thoughts changed, fooled again, thoughts changed, fooled again, and they're like these clowns that are being constantly fooled over and over again. But it's their profession to think a way how to tell this to society in, let's say, in a manner that is most harmonious. Let's call it like this. Yeah. So and this was to me, this information was really, really interesting because as soon as we finished the channel, of course there was lots of more information which I forgot. Oh, don't remember. But as soon as that, I started to searching out the pipelines throughout the Black Sea and Belarus, and it turns out that actually there is these information. There are those pipelines there, the resource pipelines. And they were talking about something in the absolute middle of the Ukraine. There are power stations. At first I thought those are nuclear reactors, but then when I checked the map, those turn out to be like a hydro plant. And father was asking, do you mean the 6 reactor nuclear station? He was like, no, in the middle, in the river. And I thought there's a power station, and one of the power lines goes to Kiev, and some of the power lines goes to the left. I was like, okay. And I was like, what about them? I don't know whether are these hydraulic power plants or not. And they told that these power lines are protected by, let's say, from above, like there's like a protection there, because they told if a power plant is shut down, it still needs power. So these hydro plants is the power source for the nuclear power plants. And there are two cases. First of all, they need the other nuclear power plants who are shut down. They need power as well. And if by any means, if it breaks down, then the flooding can cause damage to other power plants that are lower. So it's protected there. It has to be protected. They said no tank will come close to that part. I was like, okay, whatever. It's like protected from the above. About the radiation, there was another interesting thing about radiation. So as about radiation, I understood there are 2 types of radiation. One of them is metallic, heavier radiation. We're talking about the Chernobyl explosion. And the other is softer radiation that fades out through time. So the softer radiation, it likes to lower into soil, lower into trees, and maybe at some point just fade out sooner or later. But this heavier radiation, which is a different form of radiation, it tends to last very, very long. Because it has a different structure. To me, it sounds like it's heavier. The structure is more full with energy, and therefore it lasts longer. What I saw, the radiation, it's like a particle that constantly vibrates, because it vibrates and tries to dissolve energy into various places, it vibrates and explodes, and causing this huge light wave of energy, this reaction. It does it constantly. So what happens there is, they told that this heavier radiation is more conductive. It's slightly, little more conductive. So what it means is it's more metal, it more attracts metal, or metal attracts, it more attracts to metal, and thus the magnetic fields as well. So it's in a way collected, or is being attracted by metals. There are ways how you can collect radiation, which is the magnetic fields. So the father asked, can this radiation be absorbed or can this radiation be changed? And they said yes, they can be changed. I saw that you can put those radioactive waste into a highly thick metal walls. Or maybe lead walls, who knows. And when you induct some conductivity to it, like electricity to those walls, it doesn't change the radiation, but it neutralizes and balances the vibrating particles. And does that, it balances the radiation. It doesn't destroy the radiation, but it makes a balance into the radiation. Therefore, not making it so harmful to beings. So that was also an interesting thing. And talking about where did the past radiation disappear, they said that, well, because of this ability, that there were some other, let's say, alien type of beings who remotely attracted this radiation into fog-like clouds, and then remotely neutralized this radiation, neutralized out this radiation. So that was the story. And I'm already sleepy because when I start talking, I start jogging. Can I, he, she save life? The question is, can I, he, she save life after vaccine? Well, people who I know who got vaccinated have really strong side effects, and my both grandmothers, they got insult, which is basically blood bleeding inside their heads, and weak hearts. So one of her is basically paralyzed, and the other is like constantly in the hospital, like with heart failures and heart arrhythmias. And of course, they are old grandmothers, 80 years, but still everything was fine until they did the vaccination. And in the hospital, to one of those grandmothers, they said, yeah, it's all because of COVID. And my father was talking with them, and I said, but what about COVID? She took 3 shots. How is this anyway related to COVID? So I know those who were familiar that the virus didn't exist until people started to get vaccinated. So I don't know how you can save lives, because one of my friends also who did vaccine, he had a heart failure and nearly died, and he now has this arrhythmia over and over again. He's a worker, he cannot work, he was full healthy, and then he needs to watch his health constantly. So yeah, it's really, really bad news. And one other, my friend, he has a kidney failure, and my friend's grandmother, she has kidney and liver failure after that. So or highly weakened. They say that they will never take any vaccines again. So I don't know how you can save lives. Maybe it's a question of channeling, but yeah, who knows how you can save lives. Okay, thanks for the information. What made it doesn't really. I'm interested in the war, how it is going further. Already listened in Latvian what you said. Thanks, mate. Yeah, about the war. I remember one thing. My father asked, but why are the Americans really interested in this war? And there was like, this was a really interesting, a funny image. There was just dollars flying all over the map of Ukraine, just dollars and dollars and dollars, like the actual bills. I saw actual bills just flying over and over and over again. They said that Germany is donating weapons to America, to Ukraine. they're buying it from Americans and forwarding further them to Ukraine. The same with UK, the same with Sweden, the same with something also from Norway, and just forwarding. Same with Poland. And the next thing is they showed me a map somewhere next to Turkey. They're like, I understood, two countries as brothers. I don't know who are these brother countries, but it's like I think they have a similar flag and similar name. So they were sharing that the Americans just go there and they're like, well, yeah, the all war there is like a commercial advertising video for their weaponry. And they just go there and say, yeah, these are the, for example, HIMARS, the rocket systems. Yeah, you see how effective they are, how strong they are, and how cheap they are compared to their effectiveness. And they just open the videos, they just open the brochures, the footages, and they're just like selling them these equipment, selling their technology, selling their everything they have, just selling and selling them. It's like a global military business. It's like a high military business. So from my own perspective, I thought, who are the two absolute let's say dummies in this war? It's definitely Russians and Ukrainians. And I don't know who is dumber. If, for example, Russia loses this war, then you can say Russia is dumber. If the Ukrainian was to lose the war in the first weeks, I would say Ukrainians were dumber. But definitely, Americans are very smart, earning by war, fighting a war against Russian resources in a different land, in a different country, in a different continent, and just selling and selling and selling their weapons. I bet all countries around the world are just increasing their military budget by trillions, maybe more. Just buying and buying things right now, being afraid and buying things. It's like a huge business for military industry right now. And the longer the war goes, the longer the business keeps on going, keeps on rising. And so there also, anyway, there was central banks, the benefit for central banks, benefit from commissions. There was like, Americans have a huge business plan there. And it's really thought out, because you say, who are smarter? Yeah, of course the Americans. Maybe Chinese as well are really smart, because at the beginning of the war I saw that a vision that China will take part of Russian Siberia land to themselves. So yeah, why not? Actually, why not? Now, why not? At the beginning I thought, yeah, this is crazy. The Russian Empire. But the absolute first day I understood the images were like just understandable that Russian Empire will collapse, and part of the Russia will be China, and part of the Russia will be some kind of like many separated parts. Anyway, who knows what will happen? Like, nobody knows what will happen. There are like these chances and probabilities that will happen, but definitely these channeling information, it gives like a really interesting story, and that's what I really liked about these channeling sessions. They give a really interesting story that's like actually interesting, yeah, really interesting. And it's like you like to listen to it. And myself, I like to listen to it. For example, if I were to think things over by my mind, they would not be as a delicious story that myself would want to listen to. But channeling in a way gives it like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Oh, that's also interesting. Oh, how interesting about this as well. And it gives some kind of a taste to that story, and that's the one thing let's say not addicted to, but enjoyed by these channels. It's not about what they say, it's about how they say it. And it's like to me it's really interesting. Sorry, I will take this corner. Another thing which I like is because electricity now is really expensive. People are starting to save money on electricity, and I just drive. There's a complete darkness around. There are like shops used to be with lights. They're like street lights used to be on, and you go through these like small towns which I'm going through. There's like maybe 50% of the lights are off, and it's really, this is what I like. I many times I thought about, why do you need to spend energy? Okay, if it's a dam, whatever, but why do you need to keep the lights on a highway where there's nobody driving there? It's like completely pointless. No, save energy, save resources, become more efficient in what you are doing. In fact, the cars still have the lights. Okay, I understand in places where the cars are driving and etc. And at the end of this session, the information about channeling was that the beings were, we want to tell you one thing. One, let's say, important thing is that there's one thing about the wars. They do not help you to find yourself. The more you dig in, the more you start interesting about the wars, sooner or later you'll turn back and start doing something else because you don't find any joyfulness, any interesting things there. It's everything about wars. Well, they say as a comparison, everything about wars is like you are digging a brick hole in the ground, like a hole which is not made of sand or mud or anything. It's made of concrete bricks, and it's hard to dig them. And the more you dig them, the only bricks you'll find. And it's absolutely boring. There's no point of digging there. It's just like a pointless thing to put your, as a solar experience, to put your things inside the war. It's like a spent experience. And what else they told, I remember, the father asked, are humans fighting the wars? And they said, no human fights the war. And the father was like, what? I said, a human doesn't go to war. A conscious human doesn't go to war. A conscious man. A man like a race. Unhumans go to war. And by human they mean a human consists of you, let's say your body, your mind, and your higher spirit, meaning the soul, which is connected to higher understanding. Unhuman is you, your body, and your mind, nothing more. Like a disconnection with the higher spirit. Because the higher spirit is more wise, is more understanding, and is more, let's say, in balance with the overall life. And it sees automatically pointless to go to wars. So it's completely unhuman to go to war. It's completely unhuman. Therefore, why do you need to even be interested in it? And they said that putting your interests, your thoughts on maybe what is above us, maybe in music, maybe in art, maybe somewhere else, completely somewhere else, it's full of discovery, it's full of joyful discovery, it's full of fresh experience, it's full of more of yourself. You can find your higher self, your, let's say, passion, your spirit there. You can find your true self there. And they told another thing about information about this nature. And what was it? Yeah, it's so fragmented that I forgot. Anyway. So I don't know about the far human future, but I do know that when we channeled Future Human, he told that the year of 2023 is the year of humans have lived through some kind of dramatic changes, and therefore they start reconsidering that the way we were living was completely wrong, and they start reconsidering to start living completely different. And the positive changes started to happen from the year 2025, when humans started to, were the period of the darkest hours from 2019 2023, they went through them, and then they started to do positive changes in their society. Understood, after year 2025, even governmental structures will be rebuilt. So something, when we channeled that, it was, I guess, in 2018. What I understood is that in the future, even governmental buildings will be readjusted to some kind of a different working form, to some kind of a different, let's say that it's more beneficial for humans and society. Let's say the global positive changes started happening from year 2025. And they also noted that in the year 2025 there is the highest chance of getting an extraterrestrials, like a UFO or something, like a connection or appearance with them in the sky. So who knows what will happen in the future, but these interesting information, some part of them are actually already came true. Let's see what will happen, then we'll know. Okay, it's time for me to go. It's time for me to keep on driving, and I'm really tired of speaking right now. So see you guys on different videos. Bye.